Greetings and welcome to a story shrouded in shadows and revolutionary warfare. Today we delve into a covert operation on the dawn of March the 27th, 1944, where a German submarine protected by reinforced cargo ships and deadly anti-aircraft guns quietly moved through the dark waters toward La Palace. But what if I told you that the defenses surrounding this convoy were about to be rendered obsolete? Could a squadron of British Mosquito aircraft, armed with a secret weapon, an anti-tank gun transformed into flying artillery, alter the course of history? Imagine a weapon so powerful that a shell from over 1,000 yards could pierce the pressure hull of a submarine from beneath the water. And yet, it was born from a company renowned for cigarette machinery. How did engineers manage to retrofit such a massive gun onto a nimble fighter? And what devastating potential did this invention hold? And here's the question that ties it all together. Was this daring innovation the key to turning the tide in aerial combat and submarine warfare? Or was it just the beginning of a new, even more terrifying arms race? In this video, we will trace the origins of this groundbreaking weapon, uncover its secret design, and reveal how a seemingly ordinary company might have unlocked a new era of military technology, one that could make traditional defenses completely obsolete. Get ready, because the most extraordinary story of innovation, danger, and secrecy begins right now as we step into the depths of this clandestine battlefield. On the early morning of March 27, 1944, precisely at 6 o'clock, Captain Lieutenant Wilhelm Steinberg stood on the bridge of his submarine, designated 960, as it silently sliced through the dark waters of the bay, heading toward La Palace. The pre-dawn gloom enveloped the scene in a thick cloak of shadows, yet the formidable presence of the vessel and its surroundings conveyed an undeniable sense of purpose and tension. Flanking his submarine on either side were two massive, reinforced concrete-hulled cargo vessels, their bulk adding a layer of protection and mass to the convoy. These heavy ships served as a defensive barrier, their very structures designed to withstand attacks and shrapnel. Additionally, four M-class minesweepers formed a vigilant protective screen, their decks bristling with an array of weaponry, notably numerous 20mm and 37mm anti-aircraft guns, which gleamed faintly in the dim morning light. These guns, meticulously manned and ready for action, posed a significant threat to any enemy aircraft daring to challenge the convoy, prepared to unleash a wall of steel in a desperate attempt to defend their transport. Unbeknownst to Captain Steinberg and his crew, a squadron of 6 British Mosquito aircraft, along with 2 specially modified Setsi bombers, were already closing in from a higher altitude, approximately 5,000 feet above the surface. These aircraft were not ordinary bombers. They had been equipped with a revolutionary weapon specifically designed to counter the kind of defenses the convoy was employing. Their armament included 57mm Mullins guns, loaded with armor-piercing shells, capable of engaging targets from a distance beyond the reach of standard German anti-aircraft artillery. The shells were engineered to punch through thick armor and could be fired accurately from over 1,000 yards away, a range where the convoy's defenses became less effective. The British aircraft had launched their attack with confidence, buoyed by Admiral Karl Donit's new defensive doctrine, an innovative strategy that grouped submarines with heavily armed escort vessels to create overlapping fields of anti-aircraft fire, making it exceedingly difficult for enemy aircraft to succeed. This doctrine had emerged from the harrowing experiences of the previous year, 1943, when lone German submarines had been vulnerable to aerial attack while surfaced. To mitigate these losses, the Allies devised a plan to equip escort ships and submarines with an array of powerful, overlapping defenses. The crux of this strategy was to force attacking aircraft into dangerous proximity within 500 meters so they could be subjected to a devastating barrage of automatic weapons fire, including twin and quadruple anti-aircraft cannons firing 20mm shells and 37mm rounds, all designed to destroy fast-moving aircraft before they could drop their depth charges or launch rockets. This approach had proven effective, yet the Allies sought to push their advantage even further. What was not known to Captain Steinberg, however, was that the British had pioneered a new type of weapon, a flying artillery piece, that could potentially render the German anti-aircraft defenses obsolete. This weapon was a modified 57mm anti-tank gun, originally designed for ground combat, mounted in the nose of the fastest twin-engine fighter bomber in the British fleet, the Mosquito. This adaptation transformed the aircraft into a formidable flying cannon capable of engaging targets at an astonishing distance of roughly 1,800 yards, well beyond the maximum effective range of the German 20-millimeter flak, which became largely ineffective past 2,000 meters. Furthermore, the 37-millimeter guns, which had been effective against faster targets within closer range, were rendered largely useless against aircraft approaching from such distances. The conception of this novel weapon system began in 1943, when the British Air Ministry recognized the increasing threat posed by German U-boats, particularly their adaptation toward more aggressive anti-aircraft tactics rather than passive diving. One such example was the U-boat U-441, which was converted into a heavily armed floating anti-aircraft platform, dubbed UAC-1, equipped with two quadruple 20-millimeter flak cannons and a 37-millimeter gun. These platforms could lay down a devastating barrage, forcing attacking aircraft to approach within perilous distances, less than 500 meters, to effectively drop depth charges or fire rockets. At that close range, even the most heavily armored coastal command aircraft risked being shot down by the concentrated firepower. The solution to this aerial threat was surprisingly innovative and came from an unexpected source: the Mullins Company of Peterborough. Historically, this firm had specialized in manufacturing machinery for cigarette production, developing sophisticated automatic feeding mechanisms for their industrial lines. Desmond Mullins and his engineers realized that this technological expertise could be adapted for military use. They devised an auto-loading mechanism for the British QF 6-pounder anti-tank gun, transforming it from a manually loaded weapon into a semi-automatic cannon capable of firing 55 rounds per minute. Although the aircraft installation could only carry around 25 rounds due to the task of installing a formidable weapon system onto the aircraft proved to be an arduous and complex endeavor, especially given the significant weight involved. The gun in question weighed approximately 1,580 pounds when fully loaded, and its placement was particularly challenging because its barrel projected forward beyond the aircraft's nose, disrupting the conventional design and balance. This necessitated a complete removal of the aircraft's standard armament, specifically the 24-centimeter Hispano cannons that traditionally equipped the fighter-bomber variant. Instead, the aircraft was outfitted with only two 3003 Browning machine guns, which served primarily for aiming and defensive purposes rather than offensive firepower. Despite the considerable technical hurdles and the modifications required, the potential advantages of such a weapon system appeared to justify the effort when evaluated through testing. Military engineers and test pilots found that the large-caliber 57-millimeter shell had extraordinary capabilities. For instance, during tests, it was demonstrated that a shell from this gun could penetrate the pressure hull of a submarine from a distance of approximately 200 meters through 2 feet of water. These results were significant because they indicated that the weapon could target submarines from a range far beyond the reach of most German anti-aircraft gunners, who could not effectively engage fast-moving aircraft at such distances. The first prototype, converted from a Mosquito FB Mark VI with serial number HJ732, underwent its initial firing trials in June of 1943 at the de Havilland facilities. Test pilot Pat Fillingham reported that when the gun was fired, the aircraft experienced violent bucking, a phenomenon caused by the intense recoil generated by the large shell being fired. This recoil was powerful enough to cause rivets to shear in the forward fuselage, threatening structural integrity until engineers responded by reinforcing the fuselage with additional struts and installing a massive hydraulic buffer beneath the gun. This buffer absorbed some of the recoil energy, but it also created a pronounced bulge on the aircraft's underside, adding an unmistakable and distinctive feature to its profile. In response to the recoil and the increased stress on the aircraft's structure, further modifications were carried out. These modifications included the addition of approximately 900 pounds of armor plating around the engines and the cockpit floor. This extra armor was essential for protecting the crew and vital machinery from return fire, especially considering that the aircraft's new role involved engaging heavily armed submarines, which had become the primary targets during these missions. Squadron leader Tony Phillips of the 248th Squadron had been operating Mosquito aircraft over the Bay of Biscay since December of 1943. He was among the pilots transitioning from traditional low-level bomber tactics to a new, more strategic approach, just as the German U-boat fleet began sailing in convoy formations, accompanied by surface escorts. This shift in tactics made the conventional low-altitude attacks with depth charges increasingly perilous, as the risk of being targeted and shot down by anti-aircraft fire grew substantially. However, the arrival of the first weapon variants equipped with the large-caliber guns in March of 1944 offered a new strategic advantage. These aircraft could now engage enemy submarines from greater distances at which German anti-aircraft gunners struggled to track and reliably hit the fast-moving Mosquitoes. From these longer ranges, the Mosquito could maintain a safe distance, with its 20-millimeter shells often falling short or missing entirely, as the aircraft maintained a careful and calculated separation from the enemy defenses. From the German perspective, their anti-aircraft defenses had historically been shaped by experiences in the Mediterranean theater. Commander Halman Friedrich Christensen, who led an anti-aircraft battery in occupied France, had trained his gunners to engage low-flying aircraft within ranges of less than 1,000 meters. At such close quarters, the 20-millimeter Flak 38 guns could reliably hit targets traveling at speeds around 300 miles per hour. But this tactical advantage diminished sharply when the targets remained at distances of 1,500 meters or more, forcing the gunners to lead their targets at extreme angles. Even minor miscalculations during target leading could lead to a complete miss, rendering their fire ineffective. Similarly, the Italian Navy, during convoy battles off Sicily, had encountered analogous challenges. Captain de Corvetta Giuseppe Fontana, who commanded the escort vessel Orsa, discovered that while his ship's Brada 20-millimeter guns could produce a formidable curtain of fire, they rarely scored hits against British Beaufort torpedo bombers, releasing their weapons from beyond 1,000 meters. This realization prompted Italian naval commanders to seek more powerful weapons capable of reaching out to 4,800 meters, such as the German 37-millimeter guns. Yet even these more potent weapons faced difficulties when attempting to perform deflection shooting against aircraft approaching at oblique angles, particularly within the confined and complex environment of submarine pens at Loria. The evolution of anti-aircraft tactics and weaponry underscore the ongoing arms race between offensive and defensive measures, driven by the relentless pursuit of tactical superiority in the theater of naval, and Captain Hans Rudolf Rosing, commanding the 2nd U-boat flotilla, had been observing the evolving tactics of Allied anti-submarine warfare with a growing sense of unease. Over time, he had become increasingly concerned about how effectively the Allies' aircraft could detect and track his vessels, even when they were escorting heavily armed convoys. This concern was reflected in his war diary, where he noted with a mix of apprehension and admiration that British aircraft seemed to possess an almost uncanny ability to locate U-boats, submarines of his fleet, regardless of their attempts to remain concealed or protected by dense escorts. It appeared as though the aircraft could detect them through means that he and his officers had not fully understood at the time, a suspicion later confirmed when it was revealed that ultra-intercepts were providing the Coastal Command with precise routing information, enabling them to anticipate the movements of the U-boats with remarkable accuracy. Even more troubling than their ability to locate the submarines was a report from the previous patrol of U-960, one of his vessels. The experienced commanders Oberleutnant and Zursee Gunther Heinrich had observed British aircraft maintaining a respectful distance from the convoy's defenses, conducting what appeared to be reconnaissance missions rather than immediate attack runs. These aircraft, instead of closing in for a strike, kept their distance, gathering intelligence and observing the convoy's formation, a tactic that complicated the U-boats' already difficult task of avoiding detection and attack. The Japanese fleet had its own encounter with this new, increasingly effective threat, scheduled for May 10, 1944. During this operation, the submarine Suwon 29, which was carrying crucial technical equipment from Germany, including Walter rocket engines and Enigma cipher machines, was to be protected by a formidable escort composed of German destroyers Z-23 and ZH-1, along with Junker J-88 fighters providing air cover. This operation exemplified the strategic importance placed on safeguarding sensitive technology against the growing reach and capabilities of Allied air and naval reconnaissance. However, Commander Takazu Kanashi of I-29 was entirely unaware of the particular weapon or tactic that would eventually engage his escorts in a devastating encounter. As he watched through his periscope, the approaching formation of British Mosquito aircraft drew closer. Without warning, these aircraft suddenly opened fire from what seemed an impossible distance, a display of precision and daring that astonished those watching from the submarine's periscope. The explosions of 57mm shells against the destroyer's hull sent showers of splinters across the water, and in a striking turn of events, one of the Junker J-88s lost its port engine, torn away by a single well-aimed shell from Squadron Leader Phillips' aircraft. The destruction and chaos that ensued underscored just how lethal and unpredictable the new anti-air tactics had become. Meanwhile, back on U-960's bridge, the early morning of that March day was marked by a heightened sense of alertness. Steinberg, the commanding officer, ordered his lookouts to remain vigilant as the convoy approached the narrow, carefully cleared channel leading into La Pallas. The formation was protected by 4 M-class minesweepers, each maintaining a cautious station at about 500 meters from the main convoy, while 2 additional vessels, known as spare beer ships, led the way. These ships had their hulls reinforced with concrete to absorb potential mine blasts, a necessary modification given the dangerous waters they navigated. Waters that had been heavily mined by British aircraft over the preceding months. Equipped with a formidable array of armament, the ships carried 20mm and 37mm guns, all meticulously manned and loaded with a mixture of high explosive and armor-piercing rounds. These weapons had a theoretical engagement range of up to 4,000 meters against aircraft, although practical accuracy tended to diminish significantly beyond 2,000 meters. The Germans' approach to defending their submarines against aerial threats had traditionally been reactive rather than proactive. Initially, they believed that U-boats could simply evade aircraft by diving swiftly when spotted, a tactic that proved effective in the early years of the war, around 1940 and 1941, when Coastal Command had limited aircraft numbers and inferior detection equipment. However, the introduction of centimetric radar technology, which German detection systems could not pick up, combined with the use of Lee lights that illuminated submarines at night, had shifted the strategic balance decisively in favor of the attackers. These technological advances forced submarines to stay on the surface more often, exposing themselves to aerial attack and reducing their ability to evade detection through quick dives. In response, the German Naval Command launched the U-flak experiment, an ambitious attempt to turn their submarines into formidable anti-aircraft platforms. Ships like U-441, U-256, U-621, and U-953 were outfitted with quadruple 20mm mounts and enhanced 37mm guns, significantly boosting their firepower against attacking aircraft. Their torpedo load was reduced to accommodate additional gunners, with only 5 torpedoes remaining on board. Despite during a time when expectations of decisive naval engagements often fell short, the reality was frequently disappointing, especially when it came to the performance of certain attack craft. For instance, some reports expressed skepticism about the claims from flak boats, which insisted they had managed to destroy only 2 enemy aircraft, despite suffering considerable casualties themselves. This was in stark contrast to the more successful tactics employed by Allied aircraft, which had recently adopted innovative approaches that proved to be highly effective in combat situations. These new tactics involved circling at a safe distance from their targets, thereby avoiding the most intense defensive fire, while simultaneously calling in additional aircraft to join the assault. This coordinated effort was designed to overwhelm the enemy's defenses, which often proved to be more formidable than initially anticipated, turning the tide of aerial combat through sheer numbers and strategic cooperation. In the midst of these developments, Lieutenant Wolfgang Müller, who served as a gunnery officer aboard the vessel designated U-256, provided a detailed account of the ship's armament capabilities. During its conversion to the ULAC configuration, a specialized setup tailored for anti-submarine and anti-ship roles, Muller took the time to write to his wife about the formidable firepower of the quadruple 20mm mounting. He described how, when fully engaged, this mounting could fire an astonishing 800 rounds per minute, unleashing a relentless stream of tracers. These tracers created what appeared to be a solid rope of fiery light, reaching out toward incoming attacking aircraft, a sight both intimidating and awe-inspiring. However, Mueller also pointed out a significant limitation. Each magazine could only hold 20 rounds per gun. This meant that frequent reloading was necessary, which created dangerous gaps in the ship's defensive barrage. Enemy pilots quickly learned to exploit these windows of vulnerability, timing their attacks to coincide with reloads, and thus increasing their chances of success. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic and in other theaters, the British military had been actively developing responses to the persistent threat posed by the Japanese Yokoboto submarines and their associated aircraft. Their efforts spanned multiple disciplines, including technological innovations in detection and weaponry. At the Telecommunications Research Establishment, scientists had made significant progress in developing new radar systems capable of detecting periscopes at distances of up to 5 miles. Such advancements greatly improved the Royal Navy's ability to locate and track submarines, thereby enhancing their anti-undersea capabilities. Simultaneously, weapons designers at the Royal Aircraft Establishment experimented with a variety of innovative anti-submarine and anti-ship weapons. These included the highball bouncing bomb, which could be dropped in such a way as to bounce beneath enemy ships before detonating, and various guided weapons designed to improve targeting accuracy. Despite these efforts, it was ultimately the straightforward method of mounting a large-caliber gun that proved to be the most practical and effective solution. This approach gained particular traction after the Mullen Company demonstrated that their new automatic loading mechanism could reliably feed hefty 75mm shells without jamming, a critical factor in maintaining sustained fire during intense combat. Wing Commander Peter Wim Barnes, serving as the Deputy Director of Operational Requirements at the Air Ministry, was a strong advocate for the Mosquito project, despite initial skepticism from some officers. Critics argued that rockets alone offered sufficient anti-shipping capability, but Barnes contended otherwise. In a memorandum written in June of 1943, he emphasized that the 75mm gun offered significantly better accuracy at extended ranges, making it a more reliable choice for maritime operations. Trials supporting his position showed that the gun had a hit rate of approximately 33% against tank-sized targets, a stark contrast to the mere 5% success rate of rocket projectiles. Although rockets were praised for their versatility, being adaptable to any fighter bomber without requiring extensive modifications, Barnes highlighted that mounting large guns was essential for the precision and effectiveness needed in real combat scenarios. The manufacturing process at the Mullins factory in Peterborough had undergone major adaptations to produce these weapon systems. Typically known for their production of cigarette machinery, the factory's equipment and workforce had to be repurposed for military technology. Workers with years of experience creating complex mechanisms for handling tobacco and paper now faced the challenge of fabricating autoloaders capable of reliably cycling heavy brass cartridges weighing about 2 pounds and shells weighing up to 6 pounds. The feeding mechanism employed a 5-tray system reminiscent of their cigarette packaging machinery, but reinforced with heavy-gauge steel and powered by hydraulic rams. These rams were engineered to withstand the G-forces encountered during violent maneuvers in combat, ensuring a steady, reliable supply of ammunition even in the most intense situations. Intelligence agencies, including German agents operating in Portugal, had received fragments of information about British experiments with heavy aircraft armament. These reports, though incomplete, hinted at advancements in aircraft weaponry that could have a significant impact on submarine warfare. Specifically, there were rumors coming from British aircrews who, after making emergency landings in neutral territory, described a flying device, referred to as a 6-pounder, capable of destroying. The reports of these single-shot strikes had initially been dismissed by the Naval High Command as nothing more than propaganda, a tactic to deceive their enemies or to inflate the perceived threat. Staff officers, confident in their assessments, argued vehemently that the recoil generated by such a weapon would be devastating to any wooden aircraft, causing it to disintegrate upon firing. Yet what they failed to realize was that the engineers at Havilland had, in fact, surmounted this fundamental obstacle. Through innovative engineering, they had devised a hydraulic buffer system complemented by reinforced structural elements, which effectively absorbed and dampened the recoil forces. This technological breakthrough rendered the weapon capable of firing single shots without risking structural failure, a feat that had previously seemed impossible given the limitations of wooden aircraft construction. The morning of March the 27th arrived under ideal conditions for an anti-shipping strike. A thick layer of cloud cover at 3,000 feet provided an effective veil of concealment for the approaching Mosquito aircraft, allowing them to close in on the German convoy undetected. Meanwhile, occasional gaps in the overcast sky offered brief windows of visibility, enabling the aircraft to spot the enemy ships from their altitude and prepare for their attack run. These conditions created a perfect scenario for precision strikes, capitalizing on both the cover and the element of surprise. Leading this formation was Squadron Leader Phillips aboard Mosquito 18, registration NT-225. His keen-eyed navigator, Flight Officer Thompson, carefully cross-referenced their current position with the estimated route of the German U-960 submarine, information that had been provided by intelligence sources. Neither Phillips nor Thompson knew the full extent of how their target's details had been obtained, but they were operating under the assumption that the intelligence was reliable. Unbeknownst to them, the data they relied on came from ultra-intercepts, highly classified signals intelligence that had been deciphered from German naval communications, revealing the precise route and timing of the submarine's passage. Meanwhile, at the headquarters of the 19 Group in Plymouth, Air Vice Marshal Brian Baker closely monitored the unfolding operation from the operations room. Wireless reports transmitted real-time position updates from the strike force, allowing him to gauge their progress with careful attention. Baker understood that this mission was not just another attack, but a critical test of the innovative SETC concept, a new strategic approach designed to challenge heavily defended convoys. Until this point, success had been achieved against isolated submarines, but such victories had provided limited data about how this new weapon would perform under more complex and dangerous circumstances. Particularly concerning was the convoy's increasingly sophisticated defenses, which now included purpose-built anti-aircraft ships, specialized vessels designed solely to defend the convoy from aerial attack. These escort vessels posed a significant challenge. Converted merchant ships, often called spare Breer vessels, were heavily armed with up to 8 20mm guns and a 47mm cannon, all fortified with concrete armor to withstand enemy fire. Commanded by seasoned officers from the Combined Reinforcement Escort Service, CRES, these ships had been trained to operate as part of a cohesive, interlocking anti-aircraft screen. Their crews had learned to coordinate their firepower meticulously, creating overlapping fields of flak that could engage incoming aircraft from any direction. Unlike merchant sailors who might panic or become disorganized upon encountering dive-bombing aircraft, these gunners trained rigorously to maintain steady, disciplined fire even under attack, knowing that their ability to suppress enemy aircraft could make or break the success of the convoy. One such commander was Captain Zur C. Robert Gissy, who had led these specialized vessels since 1942. He had developed detailed standard operating procedures that positioned his ships to maximize anti-aircraft coverage, instructing his gunners to engage any aircraft approaching within 4,000 meters, regardless of whether it exhibited hostile intent. His underlying reasoning was that in the treacherous waters of the Bay of Biscay, any aircraft, particularly those that might be British or Allied, should be considered a potential threat until proven otherwise. This aggressive stance, while effective in some instances, had occasionally resulted in friendly fire incidents, where German aircraft were mistakenly targeted and fired upon by their own forces. The mathematics of anti-aircraft gunnery were unforgiving. Gunners had to perform complex calculations, estimating the speed and direction of the target, calculating the required time of flight for their shells, and aiming at where the aircraft would be when the shells arrived, not where it was at the moment of firing. These calculations became even more difficult as the range increased, especially considering the vessel's pitch and roll caused by the Atlantic swell. The movement of the ship added an additional layer of complexity, forcing gunners to constantly adjust their aim, a task that grew exponentially more challenging at longer distances. The probability of a successful hit diminished with increasing range, making precise calculations absolutely essential for successful engagement in such a dynamic and hostile environment. The risk of near-zero effectiveness for anti-aircraft defenses at distances beyond 1,000 meters was significant, dropping from approximately 10% to less than 1% at 3,000 meters, even when utilizing some of the most advanced ranging equipment available at the time. A striking example of this challenge was expressed by Sergeant Giovanni Martinelli, an Italian naval gunner who, after Italy's surrender, transferred to German service. He later recounted the frustrating experience of engaging British aircraft that appeared to hover just beyond the effective range of their weapons, making it nearly impossible to score a hit despite persistent firing. In many cases, the crews operating these anti-aircraft guns seemed to be acutely aware of the critical distance where their firepower would become futile. This knowledge led to prolonged and sometimes fruitless exchanges of gunfire, during which thousands of shells were poured into the sky without either side managing to land a decisive strike. These prolonged battles of attrition not only drained the ammunition reserves of the defending forces, but also exhausted their crews, who had to endure the mental and physical toll of firing repeatedly without seeing tangible results. Such encounters exemplified the futility often faced in anti-aircraft warfare, where the cost in resources and manpower frequently outweighed the benefits of the limited hits scored. Meanwhile, the Japanese naval attaché in Berlin, Rear Admiral Hideo Kojima, observed German anti-aircraft training with keen interest and documented his findings in reports to Tokyo. He acknowledged the high quality of German weaponry, especially highlighting the 37mm Flak 36, which boasted a rapid rate of fire and an effective ceiling reaching up to 4,200 meters. Despite the impressive specifications of these weapons, Kojima noted that the human element remained a significant challenge. Gunners required months of rigorous training to develop the instinctive calculations needed to lead targets accurately, a skill that became increasingly difficult to cultivate as the pool of experienced instructors diminished. This human factor was a persistent limiting element in the overall effectiveness of anti-aircraft defenses, regardless of the technological advancements. In the context of the broader war effort, ammunition shortages and the necessity of substituting personnel and combat units became commonplace. On the bridge of a convoy in 1940, a figure named Steinberg kept a vigilant watch over the horizon through his binoculars as the fleet approached La Pallas. In the distance, the unmistakable silhouette of massive concrete U-boat pens loomed, their roofs fortified with anti-aircraft positions capable of contributing defensive fire if needed. Yet despite the seemingly formidable defenses, a sense of unease crept over Steinberg. He was perhaps influenced by reports from other vessels about British aircraft behaving strangely, maintaining a cautious distance rather than launching aggressive attacks. It appeared as if the British pilots were testing new tactics or simply waiting for the right moment, an unconventional approach that the Kriegsmarine was unaccustomed to encountering. The development of the Mosquito aircraft was particularly remarkable in this context. Originally conceived as an unarmed, high-speed bomber relying on exceptional speed and altitude for protection, the Mosquito was constructed predominantly of wood, a radical departure from the all-metal designs favored by other nations during that period. This unconventional construction approach proved to be highly effective, making the aircraft one of the most versatile of the war. Capable of performing various roles, including that of a fighter, bomber, reconnaissance aircraft, and even a flying anti-tank gun. The Mosquito was powered by Rolls-Royce Merlin engines, which enabled it to reach speeds exceeding 400 miles per hour. Jeffrey de Havilland Jr., the son of the company's founder and the chief test pilot, played a crucial role in demonstrating the aircraft's capabilities. His testing confirmed that the wooden design offered several advantages. Notably, it could absorb battle damage better than traditional metal aircraft, and its smooth plywood skin produced less aerodynamic drag than riveted aluminum, thereby enhancing performance. De Havilland Jr. could hardly have imagined that his father's innovative design would eventually be weaponized in a way originally intended for tank destruction. As the morning sun climbed higher in the sky, its rays burned through the gaps in the cloud cover, heralding a new day that would witness the aircraft's transformation from a high-speed reconnaissance platform into a formidable weapon capable of carrying anti-tank armaments. An evolution driven by wartime necessity and technological ingenuity. The shimmering patches of the ocean's surface, illuminated by the bright rays of the sun, cast a brilliant silver glow that shimmered across the waves. Under normal circumstances, such conditions would have been advantageous for the defenders, as the reflective glare would silhouette the attacking aircraft against the sky, rendering them easier targets for anti-aircraft fire. This natural mirror-like effect could have compromised the attacking plane's stealth, making them more vulnerable to the concentrated bursts of gunfire from ships and ground-based defenses. However, Squadron Leader Phillips had meticulously planned his attack approach. His formation was deliberately positioned to strike from the east, ensuring that the sun was directly behind them as they began their descent from an altitude of 5,000 feet. This tactical positioning helped obscure their approach, reducing their visibility and making it more difficult for the enemy to detect and target them prematurely. As they commenced their descent, Phillips slowed his aircraft's speed, carefully throttling back to establish a steady and controlled approach trajectory. This deliberate pace was crucial, not only for maintaining formation integrity, but also for allowing his navigator ample time to accurately align the gun sights on the lead spare breacher vessel. The convoy of German vessels was arranged in a formation carefully adapted from lessons learned through 2 years of intense naval combat in the Bay of Biscay. Over time, the Germans had refined their tactics, positioning their minesweepers, vessels equipped with advanced detection gear, in overlapping fields of fire. This setup ensured that any attacking aircraft or ships would face a barrage from multiple directions, complicating their attack runs. The convoy's formation was designed to maintain sufficient separation between vessels to prevent multiple ships from being damaged by a single torpedo or bomb, thereby preserving the integrity of the entire escort. The lead vessels, known as the spare breers, were tasked with absorbing the brunt of any mines detonating near the convoy. These ships boasted heavy armament capable of engaging attacking aircraft directly, especially those attempting frontal assaults. Meanwhile, the U-960 submarine was tucked securely in the convoy's center, where it could swiftly dive if the escort screen was penetrated, ready to respond with a crash dive to evade enemy destroyers or aircraft. Yet Steinberg, commanding U-960, was acutely aware of the peril posed by shallow coastal waters. Diving in such an environment was inherently dangerous, especially with British aircraft capable of marking his position for destroyers hunting him down. The risk was compounded by the proximity to land, where the shallow depths limited maneuverability and increased the likelihood of detection. Meanwhile, in the skies, Flight Officer Turner, flying the second of the Mosquito aircraft, designated MM-425, closely observed Phillips' aircraft initiating its attack run. Turner noted with keen interest the relentless stream of tracers emanating from the German convoy as every available gun opened fire in defense. The 20-millimeter shells burst in self-destructing puffs of black smoke at approximately 2,000 meters, creating a dramatic display of fiery explosions. Simultaneously, the 37-millimeter rounds continued beyond their tracers, burning out at around 3,000 meters, farther, faster, and less visible, yet still potentially lethal to aircraft that happened to be unlucky enough to be hit by the ascending steel projectiles. The 27-millimeter projectiles, although smaller, had a remarkable range and destructive potential. Their effectiveness was underscored during trials of the 57-millimeter Mullen gun, which had astonished all observers with its precision. Test pilots discovered that, once they learned to compensate for the gun's slight downward pitch, caused by recoil, they could reliably hit a target roughly the size of a tank at a distance of 1,500 yards. The gun's formidable hydraulic buffer absorbed most of the recoil, but the force still produced enough kick to influence the aircraft's trim. Pilots had to maintain steady pressure on the control column during firing to keep their sight picture stable and ensure accuracy. Far away in Berlin, the Grand Admiral Karl Donat studied the latest reports of losses in the Bay of Biscay with growing concern. Despite implementing more coordinated convoy tactics and bolstering anti-aircraft defenses, casualties among the German ships, particularly the U-boat-class vessels, had not decreased. This troubling trend led him to suspect that the British had developed new weapons or tactics that effectively bypassed or neutralized German defensive measures. His staff members reassured him that the concentrated firepower from the multiple vessels in the convoy should have made close-range attacks too costly for enemy aircraft to attempt. The German experience in the Mediterranean provided a sobering parallel. Commander Ammiraglio Raphael Dortin, reporting to Supermarina, highlighted that British aircraft seemed to possess an uncanny ability to damage German vessels without needing to close to their traditional attack ranges, especially during night operations. This nighttime capability made it increasingly difficult for the Germans to defend their ships effectively, as the enemy's aircraft could strike from a distance, exploiting the cover of darkness to evade incoming fire. The pattern of losses suggested that the British had found ways to overcome the limitations of the warship had difficulty in tracking fast-moving targets, a challenge that grew more pronounced as the enemy aircraft became more agile and relentless in their assaults. Captain Hughes initially believed that this difficulty stemmed from technological limitations of their targeting systems, attributing the problem to less advanced sensors rather than considering the possibility that the enemy's tactics had evolved. He saw this as a temporary setback, unaware that this oversight would ultimately prove costly for the Reia Marina. In the final months leading up to Italy's surrender, several vessels fell victim to relentless aerial attacks, highlighting the perilous nature of their maritime defenses. Japanese submarine doctrine had always emphasized the importance of avoiding direct surface engagements with aircraft, especially when under threat. Their vessels, such as the WWII, were specifically designed to crash dive within 30 seconds when danger loomed, allowing them to evade airstrikes and surface gunfire alike. However, the vast and treacherous transit across the Bay of Biscay to reach their designated German ports rendered such evasive tactics less practical. The long journey forced Japanese commanders to depend heavily on German surface escorts for protection, even though they harbored private doubts about the effectiveness of these escort vessels. These doubts were fueled by recent reports from Tokyo indicating mounting losses among their ships, despite the increased deployment of heavy anti-aircraft weaponry on U-boat and surface escort vessels. The deteriorating effectiveness of defenses became painfully evident during the attack, as the enemy aircraft pressed on with relentless precision. The first 57mm shell from Phillips's artillery set struck the leading spare vessel just above the waterline, piercing its hull with a devastating projectile designed to penetrate armor. The shell detonated within an ammunition storage compartment, igniting a fierce blaze that sent a towering column of smoke and flames spiraling through ventilation shafts. Secondary explosions rippled through the ship's interior, further complicating rescue and damage control efforts. Despite the chaos and the spreading fires, the German gun crews continued their relentless barrage, maintaining their fire even as damage control teams rushed to contain the burning sections. These crews displayed remarkable discipline and training, fighting instinctively to prevent the fires from spreading further while under constant threat. Meanwhile, Steinberg watched in disbelief from his vantage point, observing the British aircraft executing their attack run from well beyond the range at which the German anti-aircraft guns could effectively retaliate. The aircraft's pilots fired measured, deliberate shots that struck with devastating accuracy, each impact punctuated by the distinct crack of heavy-caliber shells penetrating steel. This sound was entirely unfamiliar to Steinberg, who was more accustomed to the noise of bombs or depth charges, the primary threats that had dominated earlier air assaults. Now, the enemy's new weaponry was transforming the entire dynamic of the engagement, allowing the attackers to remain outside the defensive envelope where German gunners had been trained to operate effectively. The mathematics of the situation were stark and unforgiving. The 57mm Mullen gun could deliver precise fire at a range of up to 18,800 yards, while the German 20mm anti-aircraft guns became ineffective beyond 2,000 meters. This created a deadly killing zone where the British Mosquito aircraft could operate with relative impunity, their wooden construction making them difficult to track with optical rangefinders, and their high-speed complicating deflection calculations for the gunners. The combination of lightweight construction and rapid maneuverability gave the Mosquitoes a decisive tactical advantage over the convoy's defenses. Aboard the Oberleutnant Friedrich Weber, commanding one of the M-class minesweepers, the decision was made to engage the attacking aircraft with the ship's 37mm gun. Despite the extreme range, well beyond the effective reach of the weapon, Weber hoped that a well-placed shot might force the Mosquito pilots to break off their attack. Nonetheless, the British pilots appeared to understand the boundaries of their effective fire zone perfectly. They maintained their distance while systematically launching shells into the convoy, their measured rate of fire suggesting they were conserving ammunition rather than indiscriminately spraying rounds in a reckless barrage. The second attack run by the British aircraft was focused directly on the submarine, identified as 960. Flight Officer Turner carefully aligned his sight on the conning tower of the submerged vessel, preparing to unleash another precise strike. His calm and calculated approach reflected the experience and training of the pilots, who knew exactly where their fire could be most effective, exploiting the vulnerabilities of their targets while avoiding unnecessary waste of their limited munitions. This calculated approach exemplified the evolving nature of aerial warfare, where precision, range, and understanding of enemy defenses had become more crucial than ever before. During the intense naval engagement, it became painfully clear that the area where anti-aircraft defenses were most concentrated posed the greatest threat to the attacking forces. The initial shell from the enemy's gunfire struck the bridge structure of the vessel, shattering into fragments that ricocheted through the gun crews, creating chaos and danger among those manning the weapons. Steinberg, who was present during the attack, felt the violent impact reverberate through his feet as a high-velocity projectile, specifically a 57mm shell, tore through the outer hull of the submarine. This powerful explosion ruptured vital fuel bunkers, causing a spill of diesel oil that streamed into the boat's wake, further complicating the vessel's situation. Despite efforts by escort vessels to deploy a smokescreen intended to mask the submarine's position and hinder the enemy's targeting, the Mosquito aircraft's superior altitude and maneuverability allowed them to see through the gaps in the artificial fog. The pilots on these aircraft carefully adjusted their aim points based on the latest observed positions of the targets, methodically honing in on their objectives. The 57mm shells continued to find their marks with unsettling consistency, each impact further degrading the convoy's defenses. As gun positions were knocked out and ammunition stores detonated in fiery explosions, the overall defensive capability of the convoy was steadily diminishing. In the midst of this chaos, Squadron Leader Phillips launched a second attack run. This time, his objective was a minesweeper that had moved to shield the vulnerable vessel numbered 960. His remaining shells struck the ship's bridge and engine room, causing significant damage that led to a loss of speed and the ship falling out of formation. Smoke billowed from ventilation grates as fires ignited within the vessel's interior, spreading rapidly and forcing the crew to abandon their gun positions to fight the flames. These firefighting efforts created gaps in the once cohesive defensive screen, gaps that the agile Mosquito fighter bombers immediately exploited to attack with precision. The psychological toll on the German crews was profound. The realization that their weapons, designed to defend against aircraft, could no longer effectively engage the attackers, fostered a sense of helplessness that was even more damaging to morale than conventional bombing raids. Unlike traditional attacks where defenders felt they could fight back, this new threat rendered their weapons nearly useless, undermining their confidence and fighting spirit. This stark new reality compelled a fundamental reconsideration of the convoy defense tactics, which had seemed adequate only a few months earlier. As the battered vessel 960 limped into La Pallas under the escort of 3 damaged vessels and with hundreds of casualties aboard, Steinberg's after-action report underscored the futility of defending against aircraft that could engage from well beyond the effective range of anti-aircraft fire. The report strongly recommended that future convoys should be escorted by fighters throughout their entire passage, rather than relying solely on ground-based anti-aircraft guns. This suggestion revealed just how thoroughly the Mosquito aircraft had disrupted German defensive doctrine. The technical intelligence section at Marine headquarters initially refused to believe that the British could have successfully mounted a 57mm gun on an aircraft, with some experts arguing that the recoil forces would surpass the structural limits of any wooden airframe. However, as shell fragments and eyewitness testimonies accumulated, the undeniable evidence of this new weapon system's existence eventually forced acceptance of the reality. This breakthrough prompted urgent requests for longer-range anti-aircraft weapons capable of engaging the Mosquitoes before they could reach their optimal firing positions. Wing Commander Tony Phillips would continue flying the innovative Mosquito Tetsi aircraft through the spring of 1944. His missions included participation in the attack on the Japanese submarine WWII in May, during which he successfully used 4 shells to destroy a Junkers J-88 fighter, demonstrating the aircraft's versatility and the evolving nature of aerial combat. During a demonstration, a single projectile was able to completely sever the engine from an aircraft, vividly illustrating the formidable destructive power of the 57 mm guns, not only against enemy ships but also against aircraft. Although this impressive feat was considered a significant bonus, it was not the primary role envisioned for these weapons. The Mullins Company garnered considerable recognition for their contributions to the war effort, notably with Desmond Mullins being awarded the prestigious United States Medal of Freedom. This accolade was in recognition of his innovative adaptation of cigarette manufacturing machinery technology for military applications, demonstrating ingenuity in technological flexibility in wartime. Following the conclusion of hostilities, the Mullins Company shifted its focus back to civilian manufacturing, but their brief and secretive foray into weapons development remained largely concealed for many years. The true capabilities of the so-called Mosquito Tetsi were classified, and only in retrospect did the full extent of their innovations become more widely understood. In response to the threat posed by these sophisticated weapons, German military engineers embarked on an accelerated development program for new anti-aircraft systems. This included experiments with guided missile technology and shells equipped with proximity fuses designed to engage aircraft at longer ranges and with greater accuracy than previous artillery. However, these technological advancements arrived too late to influence the outcome of the Battle of the Atlantic. Throughout the year of 1944, Allied aircraft continued to exploit their technological edge, inflicting devastating losses on German U-boats. The mounting casualties among U-boat crews underscored the growing threat faced by the German submarine fleet, despite their efforts to counteract the Allied air superiority. Meanwhile, Italian naval officers, analyzing German after-action reports, expressed deep concern that their own anti-aircraft defenses were even less capable of confronting standoff attacks. Most Italian vessels were equipped with 20 mm Breda guns, which had shorter effective ranges than the German weaponry, rendering them less capable of defending against distant aircraft attacks. These deficiencies prompted desperate attempts by Italian authorities to acquire more effective German armament, specifically 37 mm and 40 mm guns, which promised better performance against the evolving aerial threats. However, these efforts were abruptly terminated in September 1943, following Italy's surrender and the end of its active engagement in the war. The Japanese submarine fleet was also studying recent encounters and lessons learned from Allied anti-aircraft tactics. In particular, they examined the sinking of the Ural-29 by aircraft equipped with Mosquito Tetsi weapons. As a result, Japanese submarine commanders began to reinforce their vessels with additional anti-aircraft armament and train their gunners to shoot at aircraft from maximum possible distances, regardless of the amount of ammunition expended. Despite these measures, their effectiveness was limited. For instance, in June of 1944, the Ir-52 was caught and sunk by conventional Allied aircraft, illustrating that even enhanced defenses could not guarantee survival when facing well-coordinated air attacks. Production of the Mosquito Tetsi aircraft continued into 1944, with approximately 27 units completed before the program was ultimately terminated. The decision to cease its development was driven by the changing strategic landscape, favoring the deployment of rocket-equipped fighter bombers that provided greater versatility and operational flexibility. Even though these newer aircraft sacrificed some accuracy, the shift was prompted by the waning threat from the U-boats and the need for aircraft capable of engaging multiple target types with minimal modification. Nevertheless, veterans from the 248th Squadron maintained that no other weapon system could match the Mosquito Tetsi in its to destroy hardened targets from safe distances. Its psychological impact extended beyond mere physical destruction, as the mere presence of these weapons caused immense fear among German submarine crews. The crews became increasingly hesitant to surface their boats, even when traveling within heavily defended convoys, aware that British aircraft possessed weapons capable of penetrating their pressure hulls from distances where their own return fire was ineffective. This fear significantly contributed to the near abandonment of surface operations by German submarines in heavily patrolled areas, fundamentally altering the dynamics of underwater warfare during the later stages of the conflict. By the late stages of 1944, the strategic environment in the Bay of Biscay had become increasingly complex, with new technological innovations and tactical adaptations shaping the course of aerial and naval combat. Among these developments, the deployment and operation of the U-boat, an advanced aircraft equipped with a highly sophisticated artillery system, marked a significant turning point. A comprehensive technical analysis of the U-boat's gun system uncovered a series of remarkably clever engineering solutions to challenges that had long confounded conventional weapon designers. Central to this innovation was the integration of an automatic loading mechanism that employed principles borrowed from high-speed packaging machinery, allowing for rapid, reliable ammunition feeding even amidst the intense and often violent maneuvers characteristic of aerial combat. This gun system featured a 5-tray magazine configuration, a design that enabled sustained firing without the frequent interruptions for reloading that commonly hampered other heavy aircraft-mounted weapons. Such a system was a breakthrough, affording the U-boat the capability to maintain continuous firepower during prolonged engagements, thereby increasing its effectiveness in both offensive and defensive scenarios. In response to the growing threat posed by enemy aircraft, German anti-aircraft doctrine evolved rapidly during this period. Recognizing the need for more formidable defenses, desperate measures were taken, including mounting massive 88mm flak guns, traditionally used by the Army, onto specially reinforced vessels designed to withstand the recoil and stress of such heavy artillery. However, these ships with the mounted flak guns proved to have significant practical limitations. Their traverse speed was sluggish, making it difficult to track the fast-moving aircraft that dominated the skies. Despite this shortfall, the primary purpose of these guns was psychological rather than purely tactical. They served as a deterrent, giving gun crews a sense that they could at least attempt to engage attacking planes. Even if the chances of successfully hitting an aircraft at extended ranges remained slim, the very presence of these formidable guns created a psychological barrier for attacking forces. Meanwhile, British pilots operating conventional Mosquito aircraft alongside their Tetsi variants developed coordinated tactics designed to optimize the strengths of both types. The aircraft equipped with the 57mm guns specialized in suppressing anti-aircraft positions from long range, creating a window of opportunity for the standard fighter bombers to close in and deliver precise strikes. These conventional Mosquitoes would use rockets and cannon fire to target vessels whose defenses had been compromised by earlier attacks, rendering them more vulnerable and easier to neutralize. This integrated combined arms approach proved to be devastatingly effective against even well-defended convoys, dramatically increasing the damage inflicted on enemy shipping. Supporting the complex operations of the Tetsi aircraft was a dedicated industrial infrastructure, including specialized maintenance facilities located at key coastal command bases. These facilities were equipped to service the intricate mechanisms of the Mullins gun systems, which required highly trained technicians skilled in both aircraft systems engineering and artillery maintenance. The collaboration between these specialists resulted in a unique fusion of technologies, representing an unprecedented integration of aeronautical and artillery engineering in military service. Their combined expertise ensured that the advanced weapons systems remained operational under the most demanding combat conditions. In an effort to counter the innovative tactics and technology of the Allies, German military researchers launched experiments aimed at developing radar-guided anti-aircraft systems capable of engaging aircraft at longer ranges. These experiments included the attempt to adapt flak systems with radar-directed targeting, designed to improve accuracy and engagement distance. However, these efforts faced significant technical challenges. The construction of the Mosquito aircraft, primarily made of wood, produced a weak radar return, making it difficult for radar systems to detect and track the aircraft effectively. Additionally, the aircraft's high speed complicated the tracking process, as existing German radar fire control systems struggled to keep pace with the rapid movements of the Mosquito, rendering these countermeasures largely ineffective against this particular threat. The impact of these technological and tactical innovations extended beyond the immediate realm of air combat, significantly affecting submarine operations as well. The persistent threat of air attack forced submarines to remain submerged for longer periods to avoid detection and destruction, which in turn dramatically increased transit times, hampering operational efficiency. This necessity for extended submerged voyages disrupted supply lines and logistical schedules, creating cascading effects across the entire maritime force structure. Destroyers and minesweepers, which were traditionally assigned to escort and protect surface vessels, found themselves consumed by the need to provide heavy surface escort for convoys, a task that diverted critical assets from other missions such as mine clearing and patrol duties. The resulting strain on naval resources underscored the pressing need for alternative solutions. After the war, the United States Navy's Operational Research Group conducted a comprehensive analysis of these evolving combat dynamics. Their findings concluded that the Mosquito Tetsi, a variant of the Mosquito aircraft specifically adapted for anti-ship and anti-convoy roles, represented an optimal tactical solution. It offered the ability to engage well-fortified maritime targets from a safe distance, avoiding the complexities and high costs associated with guided missile systems. The Tetsi's design allowed for precision attacks without the need for. During the development of innovative military technology, there was a clear strategic shift toward adopting rocket and torpedo systems that, while offering greater operational flexibility, did not yet match the pinpoint accuracy of traditional weaponry. These new solutions represented a compromise. Instead of precision, they provided versatility and the ability to strike from various angles and distances, which was especially valuable in the complex and unpredictable conditions of naval warfare. However, this shift came with significant human costs. The success of the Tetsi weapon system, for instance, was tragically underscored by the loss and injury of hundreds of German sailors. Many of these casualties resulted from the impact of 57mm shells that could penetrate the armor of their vessels, causing catastrophic damage. Survivors of these attacks often recounted the profound psychological trauma inflicted by being under relentless fire from weapons they found themselves ill-equipped to effectively counter. The mental strain persisted long after their ships had retreated to the relative safety of fortified ports, casting a shadow over their morale and effectiveness. Squadron records from the 248 Squadron detail the extensive training required by Tetsi pilots who had to learn to operate aircraft with highly unusual modifications. The unique placement of the gun, located off-center, created asymmetric thrust, which made flying these aircraft a complex task. Pilots had to master the aircraft's peculiar flight characteristics, which differed markedly from standard models. The recoil generated by the weapons also impacted the aircraft's trim, necessitating constant adjustments during firing sequences. Developing the necessary skills to manage these challenges was a lengthy process, often taking several weeks even for pilots already experienced with the Mosquito aircraft. This intensive training underscored the difficulty of mastering such an unconventional weapon platform and highlighted the specialized nature of Tetsi operations. The strategic impact of the Tetsi system extended beyond immediate combat, influencing Allied planning and tactical considerations across the Pacific theater. Military strategists proposed deploying similarly armed aircraft to disrupt Japanese shipping lanes, aiming to leverage the weapon's destructive capability against enemy supply lines. However, the surrender of Japan effectively curtailed these plans, preventing the modified aircraft from being deployed in the Far East. As a result, the Mosquito Tetsi remained a unique and somewhat isolated weapon system within the European theater, its full potential never quite realized in the broader scope of the war. The weapon's innovative concept and operational lessons, however, contributed to the evolution of aerial warfare tactics. Operational maintenance of the Tetsi aircraft posed considerable challenges. The high velocity of the 57mm rounds placed significant wear on the gun barrels, which required replacement after firing roughly 200 rounds. This placed a practical limit on sustained combat operations, demanding careful ammunition management and conservation strategies during missions. Pilots learned to prioritize their limited 50-round ammunition load, reserving their shells for high-value targets rather than wasting them on less significant or opportunistic targets. This level of ammunition discipline was crucial for maximizing the weapon's effectiveness over the course of a mission. Captured German documents pertaining to the Tetsi threat proved invaluable for intelligence analysis. These reports, once translated, revealed a profound concern among German military commanders over their inability to effectively counter this new weapon system. The documentation shed light on the morale and defensive planning of the German Navy, showing that the enemy leadership recognized the potential danger posed by the Tetsi. Moreover, Allied propaganda capitalized on these successes, publicly highlighting the weapon's effectiveness to further undermine German confidence and diminish their resolve in the face of this novel threat. Environmental factors played a significant role in influencing the operational success of the Tetsi system. The notoriously unpredictable weather conditions in the Bay of Bisque, characterized by thick fog and sudden storms, often limited flying days and posed hazards to aircraft deployment. Additionally, rough seas complicated the precise calculations required for aiming, especially when engaging moving targets such as ships at sea. Pilots had to develop the skill to adjust their fire to account for ship motion, a complex task that demanded extensive practice in realistic combat scenarios where mistakes could be fatal. These environmental challenges underscored the importance of pilot training and adaptability in ensuring the weapon's effectiveness. The legacy of the Mosquito Tetsi extended into the post-war period, influencing future aircraft armament designs across several nations. The concept of equipping aircraft with large-caliber guns for anti-shipping roles intrigued military innovators, prompting experimentation with similar weapon systems. Nevertheless, the rapid advancement of guided missile technology ultimately rendered large-caliber aircraft guns obsolete for most tactical purposes. Guided missiles provided a more practical and efficient means of engaging targets at standoff distances, supplanting the concept of flying artillery. Today, only specialized ground attack aircraft continue to utilize large-caliber guns, a nod to the innovative but eventually superseded ideas of the wartime period. Finally, German naval engineers, conducting studies on the effectiveness of 57mm shells against submarine hulls, concluded that modern submarine designs were vulnerable to this caliber at ranges exceeding approximately 1,200 yards. When struck at optimal angles, these shells could compromise the structural integrity of submarine hulls, suggesting that, had the weapons been available earlier, during the tumultuous years of the conflict, the development of the Tetsi weapon system sparked considerable debate and prompted numerous proposals aimed at enhancing its armor protection. Many of these suggestions, aiming to bolster survivability and effectiveness, ultimately remained unrealized due to the significant weight penalties they would impose, limitations that became even more critical given the progressing stages of the war and its impending conclusion. The intricate coordination between the coastal command units and the intelligence services played a pivotal role in the success of Tetsi operations, exemplifying a sophisticated model of inter-service cooperation. This collaboration relied heavily on ultra-intercepts, highly classified signals intelligence, which supplied precise targeting information to the strike aircraft. Simultaneously, reconnaissance planes provided real-time confirmation of convoy positions, enabling strike aircraft to execute their attacks with exceptional accuracy and minimal exposure to enemy defenses. This synergy maximized operational efficiency, reducing the risk to crews while maximizing the destruction of enemy vessels. Training protocols for pilots operating the Tetsi system were meticulously designed to cultivate the skill sets necessary for effective long-range gunnery. Emphasis was placed on mastering deflection shooting, an advanced technique required for hitting moving targets at great distances and accurately estimating firing ranges. Pilots dedicated countless hours practicing against toad-shaped target models, a method that helped develop the instinctive lead calculations essential for success. These training exercises aimed to refine skills more typically associated with naval surface combat, where precise artillery fire over long distances is critical rather than conventional aerial combat, underscoring the unique nature of Tetsi's operational demands. The last recorded mission involving the Tetsi occurred on the 5th of April in the year 1945, during which Mosquito aircraft launched a surprise attack against German surface vessels in the Kattegat. This operation resulted in the sinking of 5 ships, including a reserve Breer, a type of small auxiliary vessel, with all personnel aboard lost. This event starkly demonstrated that, even in the waning weeks of the war, German forces remained unable to effectively counter this innovative weapon system. Despite the desperate defensive fire from the targeted ships and the frantic efforts to intercept the attacking aircraft, the 57mm shells from the Tetsi successfully found their marks with remarkable consistency. Examination of ammunition expenditure records revealed that, on average, each Tetsi aircraft achieved approximately 1 hit for every 3 rounds fired at naval targets, an extraordinary accuracy rate. This statistic not only validated the original concept behind the system, but also showcased the potential of conventional artillery when employed with precision and proper tactics, even within the constraints of a limited production run. The human engineering considerations integrated into the TETSI system were equally sophisticated, focusing on the safety and comfort of the crews operating these advanced weapons. Special restraints for pilots were developed to prevent injuries caused by the powerful recoil during firing sequences. Shoulder harnesses were reinforced to withstand the intense deceleration forces, ensuring the safety of personnel during rapid fire. Navigators, meanwhile, required additional padding within their stations to protect against impact with equipment during the violent pitching of the aircraft, a phenomenon inherent to such dynamic firing operations. These details underscored the meticulous attention paid to crew safety amid the operational complexities of the system. Despite its proven effectiveness, German propaganda efforts sought to diminish the perceived threat posed by the TETSI system. Officially, they claimed that the weapon was ineffective against well-defended convoys, attempting to sway public opinion and lower the morale of Allied forces. However, internal German military communications painted a different picture. These confidential reports revealed genuine concern among high-ranking admirals who acknowledged, in private, that within the limits of existing German technology and doctrine, there was no effective way to counter the TETSI's capabilities. This recognition underscored the strategic challenge the weapon posed and highlighted its asymmetric advantage in the ongoing naval conflict. The industrial effort necessary to produce the TETSI aircraft was extraordinary in scope and complexity. It involved close coordination between the de Havilland aircraft factories and the Mullen machinery works. Components were manufactured at separate facilities, then transported to specially designated assembly plants where precise alignment of the gun mechanisms with the airframe was meticulously achieved. This delicate process ensured that the weapon's integration maintained structural integrity and operational accuracy, critical factors for the success of the system in combat. In response to the evolving threats posed by the TETSI, German tactical adaptations included the deployment of decoy vessels designed to lure attack aircraft away from true targets. These decoys were equipped with a multitude of anti-aircraft weapons, but minimal armor, intended to act as bait and divert fire from more valuable assets like submarines. Recognizing these tactics early, British intelligence quickly adapted their strategies, instructing pilots to ignore decoys and focus solely on confirmed submarine targets. However, operational challenges persisted, particularly the meteorological conditions required for effective TETSI deployment. Minimum visibility thresholds, conditions under which the aircraft could reliably operate and aim accurately, limited the system's utility under adverse weather, constraining its effectiveness in certain environments and times of day. During the period of wartime innovation, the development of specialized naval aircraft, such as the TETSI, represented a significant leap forward in aerial warfare tactics. These aircraft required pilots to have unobstructed visibility of their targets, which often meant flying at altitudes where traditional bombing methods, relying heavily on radar guidance, were not feasible. Consequently, missions with these aircraft were primarily conducted during daylight hours and under weather conditions that allowed for clear sightlines, parameters that shaped operational planning and tactical execution. After the war, interviews with German naval personnel shed light on how the psychological effects of the TETSI aircraft persisted long after their active deployment. Even crews who had never encountered these aircraft firsthand continued to harbor fears, stemming from survivor accounts and reports that became part of a mythos surrounding the weapon. This aura of dread often surpassed the actual number of TETSI missions carried out, illustrating how psychological warfare and propaganda can amplify the perceived threat of a technological innovation beyond its tangible impact. An in-depth cost-effectiveness analysis conducted by the British Air Ministry revealed that, despite the substantial financial investments required for aircraft modifications and the training of specialized crews, the TETSI program delivered remarkable value. It was highly efficient in destroying or damaging targets of high strategic importance, often with minimal losses to friendly aircraft. This demonstrated that, even as the military was beginning to shift focus towards missile technology and rocket-based systems, the principles underlying the TETSI concept, precision, efficiency, and targeted destruction, remained valid and influential in aircraft design philosophy. Detailed technical records from the Mullins Company archives reveal the extensive and rigorous testing procedures undertaken to perfect the automatic loading mechanism integral to the Tetsi aircraft's weapon system. Thousands of rounds were fired during ground tests, each designed to push the components to their breaking points in order to ensure that the system would perform reliably under the stressful conditions of combat. Every part of the mechanism was subjected to destructive testing, providing the engineers with critical data that informed refinements and assured operational dependability in real-world scenarios. The influence of the Tetsi program extended well beyond its own operational lifespan, shaping the development of other British aircraft projects. Designers considered incorporating heavy gun armament into various aircraft types, inspired by the success and lessons learned from the Tetsi. Notably, only the Mosquito aircraft emerged as the platform capable of integrating such heavy armament effectively. Its combination of high speed, significant operational range, and structural resilience made it uniquely suitable for deploying weapons of this caliber in combat situations, setting a benchmark for future aircraft design. German efforts to gather intelligence about the Tetsi system included clandestine attempts to recruit personnel from Mullen's factory. These operations involved agents from Abu, who offered substantial monetary rewards in exchange for technical details about the gun mechanism. Despite several close calls, British security services successfully thwarted these attempts, maintaining the integrity of their technological secrets. The operational doctrine for employing Tetsi aircraft emphasized patience and precise execution rather than aggressive attack runs. Pilots were trained to maintain an optimal firing distance, even if this required prolonged exposure to enemy fire, trusting in their aircraft's speed and agility to keep them out of danger, rather than relying on reckless maneuvering. Analysis of mission data indicates that the most successful Tetsi operations occurred when aircraft flew in coordinated pairs. In this tactic, one plane would focus on suppressing anti-aircraft defenses, laying down suppressive fire to protect its partner, which would then engage the primary targets. This method maximized the limited ammunition capacity of the aircraft and reduced their vulnerability, exemplifying tactical ingenuity in resource management and survivability. The eventual discontinuation of the Tetsi program in early 1945 reflected the evolving operational needs as the threat posed by the U-boat forces diminished, with the Allied focus shifting towards supporting ground operations and the increasing effectiveness of rocket technology against remaining maritime targets. The dedicated use of aircraft equipped with the Tetsi system was no longer justified. Rockets provided a more versatile and efficient means of engaging targets, rendering the specialized aircraft redundant in the changing strategic landscape. Historical assessments of the Mosquito aircraft's role in Allied victory highlight its significant contribution to maintaining pressure on German submarine operations and maritime defenses. Its ability to carry heavier armaments and operate at high speeds allowed it to perform precise strikes that disrupted enemy supply lines and thwarted naval reinforcements. In this way, the Mosquito exemplified the innovative spirit of wartime aviation engineering, adapting swiftly to new threats and operational demands, and ultimately playing a vital part in the broader Allied victory. During the tumultuous and decisive year of 1944, a critical phase in the naval conflicts of the Second World War, operations faced significant challenges that stem from the rapid introduction of new submarine classes into the maritime battlefield. These emerging vessel types, designed with cutting-edge technological advancements, effectively hindered the Allied naval forces from regaining and asserting their strategic dominance. Despite notable progress in submarine engineering, the tactical landscape remained complex and shifting, with the advent of these innovative subs complicating efforts to control shipping lanes and execute offensive maneuvers. The persistent evolution of submarine design during this period underscored the difficulty faced by Allied commanders, who found themselves often on the back foot, unable to fully exploit technological advantages due to the relentless pace of German innovation. Meanwhile, the preservation of the Tetsi aircraft, a remarkable and highly classified weapon system, posed a significant challenge for historians and museums alike. This aircraft, integral to a specialized maritime strike program, had its secrets guarded tightly under wartime secrecy, which complicated efforts to save exemplars for posterity. Most of these aircraft were either scrapped once their operational use concluded or returned to standard configurations, stripping them of their unique modifications. As a result, Physical relics of the Tetsi aircraft are exceedingly rare today, with the only remaining evidence of their existence found in a limited collection of photographs and detailed technical drawings. These documents serve as vital remnants, providing crucial insights into a weapon that had a fleeting but impactful role in transforming maritime attack strategies during the war's final years. Veterans who served in the 57th Squadron, which operated the Tetsi aircraft, continued to gather informally in later years, sharing memories and recounting operations that involved this extraordinary weapon. Their testimonies, although anecdotal, have become invaluable in reconstructing a chapter of military history that was kept largely secret for many decades. These veterans' accounts helped fill the gaps left by official records, which only began to emerge as wartime classifications expired and historians gained access to previously restricted archives. Through these oral histories, the wider public and future generations could begin to understand how this innovative aircraft briefly revolutionized maritime strike tactics, altering the strategic calculus at sea. The broader lessons derived from the Tetsi program extended beyond its immediate tactical successes. Foremost among these was the realization that conventional weapons and platforms could be adapted effectively to meet new and evolving threats, without necessarily requiring the development of entirely new aircraft or innovative designs from scratch. This insight proved influential in shaping military procurement policies in the post-war period, emphasizing the value of modifying and upgrading existing equipment rather than investing heavily in the creation of specialized single-purpose aircraft. Such strategies proved to be more flexible, cost-effective, and capable of responding swiftly to changing tactical demands, a lesson that remains relevant in contemporary military planning. Modern military analysts who study the history of the Tetsi program recognize its enduring significance, particularly in the context of current anti-ship warfare. Today, standoff engagement remains a central component of naval strategy, aimed at reducing the vulnerability of aircraft and ships alike by maintaining a safe distance from enemy weapons. While the Tetsi aircraft relied on direct fire guns that provided a brief but formidable ship-killing capability during the waning days of the Second World War, contemporary solutions favor guided missile systems that offer greater precision and range. Nonetheless, the fundamental principle remains the same: engaging targets from beyond the reach of enemy defenses to maximize aircraft survivability and mission success. The technological synergy embodied by the Mosquito Tetsi, an innovative convergence of aircraft design, artillery systems, and industrial automation, exemplifies the inventive spirit that defined Allied weapons development during the war. This approach often involved unlikely combinations of existing technologies, creatively repurposed and integrated to produce capabilities that enemy forces could neither predict nor counter effectively. Such ingenuity was emblematic of the wartime effort, where resourcefulness and technological adaptation often determined the outcome of battles. The Tetsi program, with its sophisticated integration of multiple technological domains, highlights how innovation in wartime is seldom about entirely new inventions, but rather about applying and combining existing tools in novel and unexpected ways. In summary, the Mosquito Tetsi marked a brief yet profoundly influential chapter in the evolution of aerial warfare, illustrating that bold and innovative thinking could surmount seemingly insurmountable tactical obstacles. Its impact extended beyond the number of ships it managed to sink. It fundamentally disrupted enemy defense doctrines, forcing the German Navy to reconsider every aspect of their submarine operations, ranging from convoy formations to anti-aircraft defenses. The emergent reality was that aircraft capable of engaging from beyond the effective range of German weapons rendered many traditional defenses obsolete, leaving submarine crews and their escort vessels exposed to precise, hard-to-defend strikes. This vulnerability contributed significantly to the eventual collapse of the U-boat threat and played a vital role in securing the Allied victory in the Battle of the Atlantic, ultimately tipping the strategic balance in favor of the Allies in the critical maritime theater.